about today are strategies to help you succeed that aren't based on content like learning the actual math, but just more habits of mind and ways to approach your course that are going to lead to success. So some of the things that I want to go through during the course of the conversation would be some of the things that have to do with your attitude and mindset, setting goals, how you organize yourself to prepare for class, the actual act of studying and doing homework, taking tests, and then finding help when you need help. So first thing about this that I think is important, and this is not just in math but for any course, is that the old serenity prayer, right? Take out the religious part of it and think about changing the things that you can control and that you can do, and to try to not worry about the things that you can't control. So there are things that you're going to be able to do to help your own success, but there are going to be things that you can't control. For example, a lot of your instructors' behaviors are things that you can't really control. And so trying to wring your hands over those things isn't going to be productive and help you in any way. So some of the behaviors that I've noticed that students have that kind of sabotage themselves start with kind of not following class rules, doing things that annoy your teacher or that are going to set you up for being in trouble with the instructor. So if they say no phones, just don't have your phone out. If they're going to say, be to class on time, you don't want to be strolling in late with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee in your hand, right? You don't want to do things that are going to make you stand out as someone who's not following the rules and guidelines. The flip side of that is, if you have an instructor who's going to allow you to have a recorder in class or a laptop in class or things like that, you want to take advantage of that and use those things to your advantage. So you want to follow class rules both to your advantage and to make sure that you're not putting behaviors out there that are to your disadvantage. Second thing I notice is, especially when it comes to math, students will confuse math anxiety with a lack of preparation for the course. And so when they do poorly, they tend to say, oh, I have math anxiety, oh, I have test anxiety. And in reality, when you question them, they really just don't know the material well enough. And so because they don't know it well enough, that makes them anxious. But it's not the anxiety necessarily interfering with what they really do know and understand. Next thing would be that sometimes a student thinks that if they're sitting near their math book, that means that they're studying, or that they're studying in a productive way. And I can't tell you how many times someone will say to me, oh, I worked on that problem for 2 hours. And I think to myself, there's no math problem worth 2 hours of your life. Those 2 hours could have been spent so much more productively recopying your notes or watching a video or doing something else that wasn't necessarily answering that particular question, but that's something you could have gotten resolved by asking your instructor, by going to tutoring. There are other ways you could have gotten the answer to that question. And so sometimes I see the students shuffle their papers around and they open this and close that instead of actually productively working toward something that's successful. And then the last thing would be waiting to get help till it's too late. And so not taking care of the problem when it's small. And I use this quote when I think about students and allowing their problems to snowball. That Machiavelli basically says that when it comes to identifying a disease at the beginning, when it'd be so easy to cure, it's hard to find. And then when it gets really big and bad and nasty and it's easy to know there's a problem here, it's really hard to fix. And so you need to try to have that skill that you can identify when it's still easy to cure the difficulties that you're having. And so my best advice is to do a daily gut check when you're walking out of class. Am I okay? Not am I perfect, but am I okay? And if you know deep down in your gut, I'm not okay, I'm not where I need to be, you have to intervene there. You have to find a way, whether it's seeing your instructor, whether it's working with an online homework system, whether it's going to tutoring. You want to have some type of a positive interaction before you're back in class again. Because math builds one class on the next. And so what you learn today, you're going to use the next day. And what you learn that day, you're going to use the next day. And so a very tiny problem right now can make the next material you're trying to learn harder to learn. Students also, though, can have good behaviors that are productive. And it starts with attendance. Show up. Show up, get your butt in the chair, and that's going to start the good things happening. The next one would be to actually buy the book or the materials that the instructor asks you to get. For the most part, they are not going to ask you to get something unless they think it's good for you, that it's going to have some value to you. You want to participate, and by participate I mean ask and answer questions. So don't be afraid to ask a question, but be prepared. Know the question that you want to ask. Again, that idea of the things that annoy instructors, we come in every day and we're going to ask, do you have any homework questions? And you're there and class starts and you're rifling through papers. You're not ready to ask that question right up front. So if you know your instructor allows you to ask questions, have the little post-it note on there or have it highlighted, be ready to ask that question. And you don't have to preface it with, I know this is a stupid question, but because that's something that the students always say, and most instructors don't think that it's silly for you to ask that question. In class, you want to write down everything that goes up on the board. You want to write everything down, even if you don't understand it at the moment. You want to write it down, and then when you have time, you can go back and take a glance at it. I encourage my students to record the lesson, even though it's math, and you don't think of yourself, oh, I'm going to drive to work and listen to the math lesson. If you sit there with your notebook in front of you and you listen to the math lesson, you can fill in more detail those notes. And maybe when the problem goes up on the board, the particular directions or steps aren't necessarily written out, but when you listen to it and you can stop your recorder and write it down, and then you can listen to the next and write it down, then when you're looking back at your notes, you actually have something that's productive for you to look at. You want to know your own strengths as a learner, and you want to play to those. So if you know that, for you, maybe you're a very hands-on, kinesthetic learner. You want to work on problems. You want to take every advantage you can I try one? You want to, if you're working on Connect Math or My Math Lab, you want to do the practice problem. Turn off that video for a second, see if you can do it yourself. Right? Just watching someone else do it isn't as productive for you. I usually will say to a student, what you want to think about, be very conscious about, is when you're having that I don't know moment, right? And you're thinking, how do I do this? What's the aha? What is it that makes, what do you think of? Do you hear your teacher saying it? Do you see yourself writing in your notebook? Do you visualize a video? Like, what is it? And that's going to be your best study guide, so that you know, hey, if what I really always makes me remember is hearing my teacher's voice, then you want to study by hearing your teacher's voice. If what you always remember is, I rewrite those notes, then you want to rewrite those notes. So you want to really kind of play to what's going to work best for you. And if you know that there's a particular strategy that doesn't work well for you, right, you want to try to de-emphasize that. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're forcing yourself to use a strategy that just doesn't work for you because maybe it works for someone else, right? You have a little study group, and for one particular person, maybe note cards work really well for them. But if note cards don't work for you, that's a waste of your time. Your time could be more productive doing something different. So again, you want to do things that are productive in helping you move forward. Habits are something that can be good and can be bad. And the things that are habitual, the things that you do repetitively, those are the things that define you as a student. And so what you want to do is make the things that are your habits be things that are positive behaviors. So first thing that I think you need to do is goal set. And most of the time when people think goals, they just think of that ultimate performance goal. I want to get a fill in the blank in this class. I want to get an A in this class. I just need to pass this class. I want to get a C in this class. But they have some type of a performance goal. But you also want to have other kind of goals. How many hours a week am I going to be able to spend on this class outside of class? How many classes do I intend to miss this whole semester? You want to have goals of those types as well. And you want to check in with yourself periodically. Am I meeting my goals, right? If I said, I want to make sure I'm not absent more than twice this whole semester, and I've got 4 absences in the first month and a half, I'm not meeting that goal. And now I have to ask myself, why am I missing class so much? Is it the fact that I decided to take an 8 a.m. class when I know I got to get my kid on the bus and it's going to be hard for me to get to an 8 a.m. class? Or did I take a class that was at 2 in the afternoon and I'm tired after lunch and I have a gap of 2 hours from my morning class and sometimes I just don't feel like hanging out and waiting? So it may be the way that you build your schedule that's the problem, not so much that it's math class. When you register for your classes, play to your strengths. Again, if you're a morning person, load your class in the morning. If you know, I'm not a person who's a morning person, then maybe you take math at 11 in the morning, or you take math as your first afternoon class, if that's going to work better for your situation. You also want to make your practice for math planned out. You want to have goals in mind. When you sit down, my goal is I'm going to do my 2.1 homework today. Or my goal is I'm going to rewrite my notes right now. Or my goal is I want to get some online homework done. So you want to really have a plan of attack and not scatter just I'm doing math, I'm doing something math. It should be something that's very directed. You want to be organized. So the most important thing is knowing your dates. When are the big tests coming up? When are the things due? You don't want to miss a due date. You want to be sure you're on top of that. You want to make sure, let's say with an online homework, that you're ahead of the schedule so that if some technology issue crops up, that's not going to prevent you from being able to finish that work. So you want to know the dates. I'm a big fan of keeping a binder as a notebook rather than a spiral bound, because then you can move things around. You can hole punch and put handouts in with notes. You can put your homework where your notes are so that you don't have to flip around so much to find things. You date things, you label them, you put titles on them so that you know what they are and can find them later when you're trying to ask a question or when you're trying to study and the teacher says, oh, this is going to be on 2.1 and 2.3 and 2.5. If your notes don't say this is from section 2.1, 2.3, and 2.5, you can't find it later to study it. So organization is huge. When it comes to studying, people kind of conflate studying with doing their homework. I would argue those are two different things. So you have the point where you're just grinding it out and getting the homework done, but then there should be a separate time where you are trying to study and just get an overview of what's happening, kind of look at the connections between things. Can I identify these different problem types when they're mixed together, right? Homework tends to be organized. We're going to do it in the exact order with these directions, and we're going to do 5 or 10 of the same kind. When you get to a test, a lot of times it's 1 or 2 problems, and then you're on to the next thing, and they're all mixed together. Are you able to do things when they're out of order? That's the thing that studying is going to help you do. You want to use your textbook. I know with math you're not thinking of read as in like a narrative, but the textbooks all have worked out examples. So write down the problem, try to see if you can do it on your own. If you can't, you can look back at the worked out example and see if you can match the work and where the issue came in if you got it wrong. So you want to take advantage of those worked out problems. You want to take advantage of, in the ebook, if they have videos embedded within, watch the videos. So take advantage of what they're giving you in the book. Use the book. You pay that money for it. Use the book to your advantage. And the online homework systems all themselves have resources. There's videos. There's extra practice problems. There's things that might not necessarily be for your grade, but are going to help you improve. You click on the show me ones. Even if you don't necessarily need it, you click on it and you just take a look at how they're doing it. What's the format of that answer? A lot of times students will say to me, I felt like I was typing in the right answer, but it was marking me wrong. But as soon as you hit the show me, you see, oh, they wanted it that way. Well, just taking that little peek takes a couple seconds, but it's going to save you time on the back end. So it's not really adding time by looking at that example. It's actually saving you time by looking at that example. Next up is test taking. And this is important, I think, to recognize that test taking has a before, a during, and an after component. And students are obviously very concerned about the during, and they tend to, if they're trying to be good students, they focus on the before. But I think they really neglect the after. So when we talk about the before, I think everyone knows it's the old P to the fifth or P5, right? Proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? That's great. And you may have your way of getting prepared for a test. The thing that I would recommend there is not neglecting the things you're good at. I think one of the biggest mistakes students make when they're good at math or good at a particular topic is not studying that. They study all the stuff they're bad at. And then they get to the test and they make a silly mistake on the stuff they're good at because they were a little rusty because they hadn't practiced it. So they're getting points off for the stuff they're good at. And then the stuff that they were bad at, they're still not good at, and they get those wrong as well. And then they end up with a disaster grade. If you do the stuff that you're good at, and you practice that, and you're sure I get 100% of the points on the stuff I know how to do, then if honestly you don't know how to do a certain word problem, or you don't know how to do a certain problem, usually it's not enough to create a disaster on a test. And that's the thing you want to first line prevent, is the disaster. During the test, you want to know what you know. You want to, when you look at a problem, you're going to have one of 3 emotional responses that the second you see it. It's going to be, oh good, I know what this is, oh, blah, fill in the curse word, I don't know what this is, or it's that little halfway feeling. Well, when you walk in the door of a test, there shouldn't be shock value. When you look at a problem, you should be able to say, oh, I can do this, or that's the kind I don't know how to do, that's the kind I'm not good at. But there shouldn't be a shock on a test, like, I don't know where this is coming from, I never saw this before, if you've been taking care of business with the homework and the writing notes and the attending class. So when you get to the test, go through the problems you know best. Get them done first. That's when you're the least fatigued. It's when you're feeling the best. You start getting right answers, that can snowball. Now you're feeling good. The worst thing that can happen is you start fiddling around with a problem that you don't know how to do, and then you get frustrated and you get yourself upset, and you're worried about things that really are negative for you. So if instead you go through the test and you start working on the things you're good at, working on the things you're positive you're going to get right, now you're feeling good about it, right? Then you go back. I a lot of times suggest when you see that problem that you don't want to do right this minute, you put a little plus sign next to it if you feel like I can probably come back and figure this out, or a little minus sign like, I really don't recognize this at all, or this is something that I know I don't know. And then later, go back to the plus signs next. And at the very end of the test, you go back to the minus signs. When it's math, sometimes it's the case that you have a multiple choice problem, you can work back from answers a little bit, or you can eliminate some of the answers that don't make sense, right? If it's not a multiple choice, you're going to write down as much work as you can. Get as far with it as you can. Try a simpler problem. If it's a fraction problem, see, well, what if this was whole numbers? What would I have done? Or what would I have done if it was a decimal instead of a fraction? And a lot of times that'll lead you in the right direction for how to do the problem, kind of simplify. But the after is the thing that I think students neglect. They get their test back, and especially let's say they get a B. Let's say you got a nice solid 85 on the test. You're like, 85, yes, in the notebook it goes, never to be looked at again. Well, for my class, an 85 might mean you had 5 wrong answers, right? 5 3-point problems. Well, those are 5 gaps in your knowledge. Now, on each of your 3 chapter tests, you had those 5 wrong. You'd have a nice solid 85 average, but there'd be 15 things you don't know how to do. Now the final exam comes. Well, what happens if those 15 things are on the final? Now all of a sudden you've got a problem come final exam time. So when you get the test back, my strong suggestion is you take every problem you got wrong and you take a look at it, see what did I do wrong, right? Try to fix it. Maybe do a couple more problems that are similar to that one to try to reinforce the mistake, reinforce the correct answer. Mistakes come in, I identify them into 4 varieties. The first kind is going to be secretarial. Oh, I miscopied it. Oh, I misread my handwriting, right? Something that is literally a mistake in the way you read the problem or the way that you copied things down. Then you've got computational. You multiplied 9 times 7 and you got 54, right? That kind of a computational error. Those 2 types of errors tend to be the more, I'm nervous during the test, I'm anxious, and I rushed, and I made that kind of a mistake. It's not about not knowing how to do the problem. So those are the kinds of errors that you take care of during test time, by checking your answers, by recalculating more than once, by doing things that are going to ease your anxiety. The third type of problem is procedural. That's where maybe in an order of operations problem, right, you confused that you had to multiply before you divide when that's not really the case, you go left to right. So you know that you're supposed to be following order of operations, but somehow within the steps, you mixed up a step. Or maybe you took the problem all the way to the end and you had to answer 4/8, and you forgot to reduce it down to lower terms to 1/2, right? That's a procedural issue. And then the conceptual, which is, I don't even know how to do this at all, or I'm not using the right technique to do this type of problem. I misunderstood what kind of problem it is. Those 2 types of problems, they're before the test issues. They're not being prepared enough, not practicing enough, or not spending enough time mixing the different problems up so you can recognize, oh, this is that kind, not that kind. So those kinds of mistakes are going to be pre-test fixes. So if you look at your exam, you got that 85 and you get the 5 problems back, and all 5 problems were computational secretarial kind of problems, I got to slow myself down. When I'm taking this test, I have to be more careful. I have to check my work, those kinds of fixes. If you see, though, that your issues are more conceptual, you know that the way that you're preparing for the test isn't what it needs to be. Last thing is the idea of getting help. And depending on who your teacher is, what the situation is, your teacher should be your first line of attack. So if you're comfortable talking to your teacher, that's always your first line. They may have office hours, they may have times that they set up for tutoring, they may offer that you could sit in another class if you want to see a lecture a second time, right? There's things that your teacher can certainly do for you. If they have PowerPoints, they may have them available for you to print out ahead of time so that it helps with your note-taking. So there are things that they can help you with. We have free available tutoring on the campus, so you can take advantage of that. When you go to tutoring, you want to be in control of that situation. So if you're in stat and we use a calculator and you go to tutoring and they're trying to teach you a by-hand formula, you're going to say, no, I want to do that on the calculator. And if the person who's tutoring is going to say to you, oh, but I don't know how to use the calculator, then just say, well, thank you for your time, and walk out. Because again, productive studying. If your teacher's going to say, do this on the calculator, don't spend hours doing something by hand, right? That wouldn't make sense. So control the situation, but go in prepared. I have a question here. Not just, I'm going to throw my notebook on the table and say, I don't understand anything. But, when my teacher did this problem, I understood where line 1 came from, but line 2, I don't know where that number came from. Or in this formula, what's this letter T? I don't understand what letter T stands for. So you want to try to be as specific with your questions as you can be when you're looking to get that help. And again, prepare, have things marked with a Post-it note or with highlighting to remind yourself, here's where the question was. Maybe even write the question down in your notebook at that spot about what the particular question was that you had for that. The online help, right? Your online system, whether it's Connect Math or My Math Lab, has helps within it. In some cases, they even have the ability for you to chat with someone through the online. But you can also go out to other sites, third-party type sites, Khan Academy or YouTube. I love YouTube for stat because you can, say type in TI-83 and the word mean, and you're going to get these awesome videos where they are showing you all the button pushes that you need to do in order to find a mean on that calculator. Or you might, if it's an algebra, quadratic formula, and you'll get loads of videos on how to use the quadratic formula. So YouTube, inexpensive, don't have to pay a cent for that. You can go out there and get help. But you don't want to wait. You want to do that as soon as you see a minor issue coming up. So you want to really take control. You want to be the person who makes the decisions about your own time, how it's going to be spent, who it's going to be spent with. Do take advantage of if you have folks in your class who want a study group or things like that, if it's going to help you. Don't feel like you have to get involved with that if you've got someone who's not going to be helping you. Not that you want to be rude about it, but you want to do things that are going to help you learn. So if you're working with a student who might be a little weaker than you, it could help you to talk it through and explain to them. That can actually help you learn. If you're working with a student who's maybe a little stronger than you, maybe they're too fast. Maybe it's not helping you because they already know things that you don't. And so you feel like you're hanging on by coattails and it's not really helping you. So you have to really do things that are going to be helping you and be productive for you. So kind of in summary, you want to start off by having a plan, working the plan, doing productive work. If you feel like you're working on something and you're really, really lost, go back to writing out the examples from the book or rewriting the notes that you took in class. And sometimes that act of writing out a problem done correctly is going to now all of a sudden open up, okay, now I see what they were doing there. Now I understand what that step involves. So doing something that's going to be productive and moving you forward is always going to be better than just sitting there tearing your hair out on things that you don't know how to do. Right? Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. So do you have any questions or anything you'd like to hear more about?
No, not really.
No? Okay.
It's procrastination.
Yeah, and that's part of the goal setting and the planning. So, one of the things about math, especially, in some of the algebra type courses, you may have had experience with some things before. So there may be some parts of the class where it's like, I know this, I'm right with this, I don't really have to do a whole lot outside of class because I'm good at it. And then there might be other things, maybe word problems or something, and you're like grinding halt, oh wait, this is a problem. So there might be times when 1 or 2 hours outside of class is getting you done everything you need to get done, and then there might be another week where you can put in 10 hours and still feel overwhelmed. So it's not necessarily going to be linear. It's not necessarily going to be the case that every week requires the same amount of effort. So, instead of spending 1 hour an hour before something is due, maybe you spend 1 hour at the very beginning, because then if there's a problem, you have plenty of time to take care of that issue. If you wait until the very last minute and then spend that 1 hour and you're in trouble, there's not enough time to safety net to help you out there. So if you plan ahead, I really know I can only put an hour in, try to put that hour in earlier rather than later. The other thing I always suggest is, if I had an hour I'm going to give for a week, I'd give it 4 different days, 15 minutes apiece, instead of 1 hour, 1 day a week. Touch math as frequently during the week as you can. So the analogy I always use for that is, if doctor gave you a prescription and said, I'm going to give you these 30 pills, right, and we take 1 a day. If instead on the 30th day of the month you just downed all 30 pills, right, would you have the same outcome? Not even close, right? So if you take it a little bit every day, that's going to be a different experience. Well, the way that you learn, the way that your brain works, is every time you touch it, you're making connections. And so spending just 15 minutes a day makes a huge difference in the overall remembering. I know I have a lot of students, they'll see me on, say, on a Thursday night, and they won't pick their book up again until Thursday during the day, or maybe Wednesday the day before. And it's a long and distant memory to try to recover it. But if after having class on Thursday, maybe on Saturday, they worked on it for 15 or 20 minutes, so it's still fresh, now they get through it quicker, right? Because it's still fresh, and so they don't have to remind themselves for so long what they're doing. Then they pick it up again on Monday, and it's still fresh because they just looked at it Saturday. And so there's not as much forgetting that happens, and you don't have to spend as much time then in total, because everything is staying kind of fresh as you go. So, yeah, procrastination. I'd procrastinate on the procrastination if you can do that. Try to figure out a way, like I said, even if it's just little bits, little chunks, to try to get something done. So, thank you so much for coming, and good luck with everything.